The great chamber of the Galaxy Council had not known true silence in 3,000 years. 47 species filled the massive hall. Their representatives sat in floating pods arranged in a perfect circle around the central platform. Lights of every color reflected off the crystal walls. Translators hummed softly as they converted thousands of languages into one. Ambassador. Lena Vasquez stood alone on that central platform. She was a small woman with dark hair pulled back from her face. Her simple gray uniform looked plain compared to the flowing robes and glittering armor worn by other ambassadors. This was only her 3rd month representing Earth in the Council. She was still learning the politics and the unwritten rules. But today, she had broken the biggest rule of all. "I will repeat myself for those who did not hear," Alina said. Her voice was calm and steady. "The United Earth government formally declares war on the Varathi Dominion." The silence stretched for 5 heartbeats. Then the chamber exploded. Ambassador Zithos of the Keldari Collective rose from his pod. His blue skin had turned pale with shock. "This is madness. No species has declared war in 3,000 years. Perhaps it is time someone did," Alina replied. "The Varathi ambassador." A massive creature covered in black scales let out a sound that the translator converted to laughter. His name was Krathver, and he represented a dominion that controlled 200 star systems. His military had crushed rebellions across half the galaxy. "Let her speak," Krathver said with amusement. "I want to hear why these newcomers wish to destroy themselves." Alina turned to face him directly. She felt fear in her chest, but she did not let it show. Fear was useful. It kept you sharp, but it could never be allowed to make your decisions. 3 hours ago, Alina began, Ambassador Krathver presented what he called a resource acquisition report. "The Varathi Dominion has begun mining operations on the planet Vareth 7 in the Outer Territories." "This is within our legal rights," Krathver interrupted. "The Outer Territories belong to no council species." "I did not finish," Alina said firmly. "Vareth 7 is home to a civilization called the Marashi. 2 billion people live on that planet. They have cities, families, art, music, and dreams. They have not yet developed space travel, so they cannot speak for themselves in this chamber." She paused and looked around at the other ambassadors. Most of them avoided her eyes. "Ambassador." Krathver mentioned in his report that the Mirashi population has been relocated to underground. Facilities to make room for mining equipment. Relocated. That is a gentle word for what I saw in the classified images my government obtained. Alina pressed a button on her wrist device. Holographic images appeared in the center of the chamber. They showed thousands of Mirashi people crowded into dark tunnels. Their bodies were thin. Their large eyes looked empty. Armed Varathi soldiers stood guard over them. "These are labor camps," Alina said. "The Varathi are using the Mirashi as slaves to mine their own planet. They are not council members," another ambassador called out. "The non-intervention accord clearly states that we cannot interfere with the affairs of non-member species. The non-intervention accord was meant to protect developing civilizations from exploitation." Alina shot back. "Not to give permission for it." Krathver waved one of his massive clawed hands. "The human ambassador is young and does not understand how things work in our galaxy. The Mirashi are primitive. They would have destroyed themselves eventually. We are simply making use of resources that would otherwise go to waste." Alina stared at him. "Resources? You call 2 billion living beings resources. I call them what they are." Alina felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had hoped foolishly, perhaps, that she could convince the council to act. She had spent the last 3 hours sending messages to every ambassador, spending for support, explaining the horror of what was happening. Every single one had refused. The Dranathi ambassador had expressed sympathy but explained that his people could not risk trade relations with the Varathi. The Keldar ambassador had called the situation unfortunate but not their concern. Even the Solani, who were known for their compassion, had simply looked away. No one would help. Alina had contacted Earth and explained the situation. The response had come back in less than an hour. The President, the Council of Nations, and the people of Earth had spoken with one voice. Now Alina had to deliver their message. "I requested a recess earlier today to consult with my government," Alina said. "I have received their answer." She straightened her spine and lifted her chin. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice remained steady. "The Varathi Dominion has committed crimes against the Marashi people. These crimes include enslavement, forced displacement, and the destruction of civilian infrastructure. Earth has asked this council to intervene and received no support." She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of every ambassador who would look at her. "Therefore, Earth will act alone. We declare war on the Varathi Dominion. We will not rest until every Marashi prisoner is freed and their right to live in peace is restored." Krathvar's laughter boomed through the chamber. "You have 12 star systems. I have 200. Your military is a joke compared to our fleets. You will be destroyed in a matter of weeks." "Perhaps," Alina said, "but we will fight anyway." Ambassador Zithos demanded, "What do you gain from this? What resources? What territory? What trade advantages?" Alina smiled sadly. "Nothing." The chamber went quiet again. This answer made no sense to them. In 3,000 years of galactic politics, no species had ever gone to war without something to gain. War was expensive. War was dangerous. No logical species would choose it without profit. "I do not understand," said the Solani ambassador. Her voice was soft and confused. "Why would you risk extinction for a species you have never met?" Alina thought of her grandmother. She thought of the stories she had heard as a child about a dark time on Earth when people had been rounded up and sent to camps. She thought of the strangers who had risked everything to hide families in their homes, to forge documents, to smuggle children to safety. "Because it is right," Alina said simply. "Because they need help, and we can give it. Because if we look away, we become no better than the ones holding the chains." She stepped down from the platform and began walking toward the exit. The other ambassadors watched her in stunned silence. "You are making a terrible mistake," Krathvar called after her. "My fleet will crush your planets. Your species will be remembered as fools." Alina stopped at the door and looked back. "Maybe, but at least we will be remembered as fools who stood for something." She walked out into the corridor, leaving the Galaxy Council in chaos behind her. Earth had just declared war on an empire 20 times its size. By every logical calculation, humanity was doomed. But Alina knew something the other species had forgotten. Humans had never been very good at logic when innocent lives were at stake. They had always been better at something else: hope, the galaxy. Council chamber erupted into chaos the moment Ambassador Alina Vasquez left. Ambassadors shouted at each other. Translators struggled to keep up with the flood of languages. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. Ambassador Zithos, of the Keldari Collective, floated his pod toward the center platform. His 4 arms waved for attention. "Order. We must have order." It took several minutes for the noise to die down. When it finally did, Zithos turned to face the Varathi ambassador. "Krathvar, surely you will not actually engage the humans in war. They are young and foolish. Perhaps a warning shot to bring them to their senses would be enough." Krathvar's scaled face twisted into something like a smile. "A warning shot? No, Ambassador. The humans have insulted the Varathi Dominion before the entire galaxy. They will be crushed completely. Their planets will burn. Their species will serve as an example to anyone else who dreams of challenging us." He activated his communication device. A holographic image appeared showing a massive warship. It was the flagship of High Commander Thesero, the most feared military leader in the Dominion. "High Commander," Krathvar said, "the humans have declared war. You have my authorization to respond with full force." Thoxorel's image nodded slowly. He was even larger than Krathvar, with scars covering his face from decades of battle. "It will be my pleasure. I have studied the human military. They have courage, but no experience. Their ships are fast, but weak. This war will be over before they can mount a real defense." He leaned closer to the screen. "I am transmitting a message to the human ambassador now. She has 1 galactic cycle to withdraw her declaration. If she refuses, I will personally lead the fleet that destroys her homeworld. The transmission ended. The chamber fell silent again. Ambassador Zithos felt troubled. Something about this situation did not sit right with him. The humans were clearly outmatched. Any species with basic intelligence could see that war with the Vorathi was suicide. Yet the human ambassador had shown no fear. She had not even tried to negotiate for better terms. Why? The answer came to him slowly, and it made his blood run cold. The humans were not stupid. They knew they could not win. They had chosen to fight anyway. This concept was so foreign to Zithos that he could barely process it. In all his years of diplomacy, he had never encountered a species willing to sacrifice itself for strangers. The very idea seemed like madness. But was it madness? Or was it something else entirely? Meanwhile, Alina had returned to the human embassy. It was a small building compared to the grand structures of older species. Only 50 staff members worked there. They gathered in the main hall as Alina entered. "It is done," Alina said. "Earth has declared war." No one cheered. No one celebrated. They all knew what this meant. Many of them would not survive the coming months. Their families back home might never see them again, but not a single person asked to leave. "What are our orders?" asked Commander David Park, the military attaché. "We prepare for evacuation of non-essential personnel. Everyone else stays to coordinate with Earth Command." Lena paused. "And we wait for the Vorathi response." The response came within the hour. Saxarel's message appeared on every screen in the embassy. His scarred face filled the display. "Human ambassador," he growled. "I am High Commander Thaxorel of the Vorathi Dominion. Your declaration of war is the most foolish act I have witnessed in my 200 years of service. You have one galactic cycle to withdraw your statement and apologize publicly. If you refuse, I will reduce your species to ash and scatter your remains across the void." The message ended. The embassy staff looked at Alina, waiting for her response. Alina recorded her reply immediately. She kept her voice calm and her expression steady. "Hi, Commander Thaxorel. I am Ambassador Alina Vasquez of Earth. I have received your ultimatum. Here's my answer. The human declaration of war stands. We will not withdraw. We will not apologize. We will fight for the Mirashi people until they are free or until we are destroyed." She leaned slightly forward. "Your dominion has never faced an enemy like us. You have conquered species who fought for territory, for resources, for survival. We are not fighting for any of those things. We are fighting because innocent people are suffering, and we have the power to help them." Her eyes hardened. "You may destroy us, but you will never defeat us. And the galaxy will remember what we stood for long after your empire has crumbled to dust." She ended the recording and sent it before anyone could object. Commander Park stared at her with wide eyes. "Ambassador, you just told the most powerful military commander in the galaxy to do his worst." "Yes," Alina agreed. "I did. Why?" Alina smiled tiredly. "Because he needed to understand that threats will not work on us. Fear is his greatest weapon. Once he realizes we are not afraid to die, he loses half his power." The embassy remained busy through the night. Messages flew between Earth and the Council Station. Military commanders on Earth began planning defensive strategies. Scientists worked on new weapons that might even the odds. Ordinary citizens volunteered by the millions, ready to fight for a cause they believed in. But something else was happening too, something no one expected. Across the galaxy, news of humanity's declaration spread like fire. At first, other species laughed at the foolish newcomers. But as hours passed, the laughter faded. People began asking questions that had not been asked in 3,000 years. Why wouldn't the Council protect the Mirashi? Why did it take the youngest species in the galaxy to stand up for the innocent? What did it say about their own civilizations that they had looked away? On the Keldari homeworld, protests broke out in major cities. Citizens demanded that their governments support the humans. Similar scenes played out on a dozen other planets. The comfortable peace that the galaxy had enjoyed for millennia suddenly felt like cowardice. Back at the human embassy, Alina was preparing to sleep for the first time in 30 hours when her door chimed. She opened it to find a young Keldari woman standing in the corridor. She recognized her as Thyra, the junior aide to Ambassador Zithos. Thyra's face was wet with tears. Her hands trembled as she held out a data chip. "What is this?" Alina asked. "Intelligence files," Thyra whispered. "Varathi military positions, fleet movements, weaknesses in their defenses." She took a shaky breath. "My grandmother was Mirashi. She escaped Vareth 750 years ago before the Varathi came. I grew up listening to her stories about her home." Alina took the chip gently. "This could end your career. You could be imprisoned for treason." Thyra lifted her chin. Her tears still fell, but her voice grew stronger. "I have spent my whole life being careful, being quiet, being safe." She met Elena's eyes. "You taught me something today, Ambassador. Some things are worth more than safety." Alina pulled the young woman into a hug. "Thank you," she whispered. "You may have just saved millions of lives." When Thyra left, Alina looked at the data chip in her hand. It was a small thing. A piece of technology no bigger than her thumbnail, but it proved something important. Humanity was not alone anymore. One act of courage had inspired another, and somewhere out in the galaxy, more people were finding their own courage too. The war had not even started yet, but already, things were changing. Admiral James Chen stood on the bridge of the ESV Defiance and stared at the star map before him. Red dots representing Varathi warships outnumbered the blue dots of Earth's fleet by 15 to 1. Any normal commander would look at those numbers and surrender immediately. Chen was not a normal commander. He had grown up reading stories of impossible victories: Thermopylae, Dunkirk, the Siege of Malta. Throughout human history, smaller forces had faced overwhelming odds and found ways to survive. Sometimes they even won. The secret was never about numbers. It was about will. "Admiral," said his tactical officer, "we have received the intelligence package from Ambassador Vasquez." Chen turned from the star map. "Put it on screen." The data from Thyra appeared before him. Fleet positions, patrol schedules, supply routes, and most importantly, the location of the labor camps on VE Wrath-7. Chen studied the information for a long time. A plan began to form in his mind. It was risky. It was unconventional. It might get them all killed. It was exactly the kind of plan that might work. "Get me a secure line to Earth Command," Chen said, "and wake up the ground force commanders. I have an idea." 3 days later, Alina received an urgent summons to the Galaxy Council. She walked into the chamber expecting another confrontation. Instead, she found chaos of a different kind. Ambassador Zithos rushed toward her as soon as she entered. "Ambassador Vasquez? What have you done?" "I am not sure what you mean," Alina replied. "The protests." Zithos waved his forearms in frustration. "Every major world in the collective is experiencing civil unrest. Citizens are demanding we support Earth. They are calling their own government cowards." Alina kept her face neutral, but inside she felt a spark of hope. "I did nothing except speak the truth. Perhaps your citizens are tired of looking away from injustice." Similar reports came from other ambassadors. The Dranathi were facing public pressure to cut trade ties with the Varathi. The Solani High Council had received more citizen petitions in 3 days than in the previous decade. Even species that rarely engaged in politics were suddenly paying attention. The council speaker called the session to order. His voice boomed through the chamber. "We have convened this emergency session to address the growing instability caused by humanity's reckless declaration of war. I call upon the ambassadors to condemn this action formally." Lena walked to the central platform. She had expected this. The council wanted to isolate humanity, to make an example of them so that order could be restored. She would not make it easy. "Before any vote is taken," Alina said, "I request permission to address the council." The speaker hesitated. Protocol required that he grant the request. "You may speak." Lena took a deep breath. She had prepared for this moment. Her words would be broadcast across the galaxy. Billions of beings would hear what she said next. 3 days ago, I declared war on the Varathi Dominion. Many of you called me foolish. Some called me suicidal. None of you offered to help." She paused. "I want to tell you why we fight." She pressed a button on her wrist device. New images appeared in the chamber. These were different from before. These showed the full horror of the Vorathi camps. These images were taken yesterday by our long-range scouts. The Mirashi are not just being used as slave labor. They are being harvested. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The images showed Mirashi bodies in medical facilities. Vorathi scientists extracted fluids and tissue samples. Living beings were treated like livestock. The Vorathi have discovered that Mirashi biology produces compounds useful for their pharmaceutical industry, Elena continued. They are not mining the planet. They are mining the people. And when they have extracted everything useful, they dispose of the remains. She turned to face Crathford directly. The Vorathi ambassador's face had gone blank. "This is what your Dominion is doing," Elena said. "This is what the Council's non-intervention policy protects. This is what every ambassador in this room chose to ignore." The chamber erupted in shouting. Some ambassadors demanded proof. Others called for an immediate investigation. Crathford tried to speak, but his voice was drowned out by the noise. Elena stood calmly in the center of the storm. She had done what she came to do. The truth was out. Now the galaxy would have to choose. The session dissolved into arguments that lasted for hours. No formal vote was taken. The council was too divided to reach consensus on anything. But when Elena returned to the embassy, 3 messages were waiting for her. The first was from the Volani Republic, a small species that had never taken sides in galactic politics. They announced they would provide humanitarian support to Earth's war effort. Medical supplies, food, shelter for refugees. The second was from the Thornax Confederacy, another minor power. They would not fight. They would allow Earthships to use their space stations for repairs and resupply. The third was from the Syrian Union. Their message was short. "We stand with Earth. Tell us where to send our volunteers." Lena read the messages 3 times. Tears formed in her eyes, but she blinked them away. 3 species had found their courage. 3 was not many compared to 47. But 3 was more than 0. And tomorrow, there might be 4. Or 5. Or 10. She forwarded the messages to Admiral Chen with a simple note. "You are not alone out there." Chen received the messages as his fleet prepared to move. The plan was simple in concept, but dangerous in execution. They would not attack the Vorathi fleet directly. That would be suicide. Instead, they would go straight for VE Wrath-7. The goal was not military victory. The goal was rescue. Admiral, his communications officer, reported, "High Commander Thaxarel has sent a final warning. He says if we move 1 light-year closer to Vorathi's space, he will destroy Earth." Chen considered the message. Thaxarel was trying to use fear. It was the same tactic that Vorathi had used for centuries. Threaten destruction. Watch your enemies back down. But Chen understood something that Thaxarel did not. The Vorathi had never fought an enemy with nothing to gain. They had never faced an opponent willing to accept terrible losses for a moral victory. Their strategies assumed that every enemy would eventually calculate the cost and surrender. Humans did not calculate like that. Never had. Never would. "Send this reply," Chen said. "Tell the High Commander that we received his warning. Tell him we are coming anyway." He turned to his bridge crew. Their faces were pale but determined. They all knew the odds. They all knew what they were risking. "Jump to hyperspace," Chen ordered. "Set course for Varith-7. We have people to save." The fleet vanished into the void. The war had truly begun. High Commander Thaxarel stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human fleet emerge from hyperspace. His tactical officers counted the ships. 47 human vessels against his 700. The odds were so one-sided that Thaxarel almost felt insulted. "They actually came," his second-in-command observed. "I did not believe they would be this foolish." Thaxarel studied the human formation. Something felt wrong. The humans were not arranging themselves for battle. Their ships were spreading out in a wide pattern, heading in different directions. "What are they doing?" Thaxarel muttered. The answer came seconds later. The human fleet was not approaching his position. They were heading directly toward Vareth 7. They mean to attack the planet, his tactical officer said with confusion. But we have minimal ground forces there. The population is contained. What could they possibly gain? Thaxarel suddenly understood. His scales darkened with anger. They are not attacking. They are rescuing. The humans did not care about military victory. They had come to free the Marashi. Every calculation Thaxarel had made was based on the assumption that his enemy wanted something concrete, territory, resources, strategic advantage, but the humans wanted none of those things. They wanted to save strangers. All ships, Thaxarel roared, intercept the human fleet. Do not let them reach the planet. The Varathi armada began to move. 700 warships turned toward the much smaller human force. Even at maximum speed, the humans could not outrun them all. This would be a slaughter, but Admiral Chen had expected this response. All transport ships continued to the planet Chen ordered from the Defiance. Combat vessels formed defensive screen. Buy them as much time as possible. 20 transport ships broke away from the fleet and accelerated toward Vareth 7. The remaining 27 warships turned to face the incoming Varathi armada. They would be destroyed. Everyone on those ships knew it. But every minute they held the line was another minute for the rescue. Mission, the battle began. Varathi weapons fire tore through space. Human shields flickered and failed. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Chen watched his fleet dying ship by ship, but he did not order retreat. They had known the cost when they came. On Vareth 7, the first human transport ships reached the atmosphere. Ground teams descended toward the labor camps. They were soldiers. But today they were not here to fight. They were here to evacuate. Captain Maria Santos led the first team into Camp 7. What she found would haunt her for the rest of her life. Thousands of Mirashi huddled in dark tunnels. Their large eyes blinked in the sudden light from human flashlights. Many were too weak to stand. We are here to help, Santos said. Her translator converted the words into the Mirashi language. We are taking you somewhere safe. At first, the Mirashi did not move. They had learned that promises meant nothing. They had been told they would be safe when the Varathi first came. That promise had been a lie. But then one young Mirashi stepped forward. She was barely more than a child, with thin limbs and a face marked by hunger. She looked at Santos with something like wonder. You are human, the child said. The ones who declared war for us? Yes, Santos replied. We came. The child turned to the others. They came, she repeated. The humans actually came. Something shifted in the crowd. Hope returned to faces that had forgotten what hope felt like. Slowly at first, then faster, the Mirashi began moving toward the transport ships back in space. The battle was not going well. Half of Chen's combat ships were gone. The others were damaged and struggling to hold position. The Varathi were too many. There was no way to win, but winning had never been the goal. Admiral, his communications officer, reported, the transport ships have loaded 40,000 Mirashi. They are requesting permission to launch. Tell them to go, Chen said. We will cover their escape. The transport ships rose from Vareth 7 and began their hyperspace calculations. Varathia fighters broke through the human defensive line and pursued them. Several transports took hits. One exploded before it could jump, but the others made it. 38,000 Mirashi escaped into hyperspace. Heading toward safe harbor and allied territory, Thaxarel screamed with rage. He had destroyed most of the human fleet, but the humans had achieved their objective anyway. They had rescued the prisoners. They had proven that his empire could not protect its own territory. The entire galaxy was watching. Every news channel broadcast the battle live. Billions of beings saw tiny human ships sacrifice themselves so that strangers could be free. They saw courage that defied all logic, and they began to ask themselves, why did we not do this? Ambassador Zithos watched from the council station. His hands trembled as he reached for his communication device. The protests in Keldari space had grown larger every day. His government was facing a choice: continue doing nothing, or stand with the species that had shown them what courage looked like. Zithos made a decision he had been avoiding for days. He contacted his homeworld and spoke with the Keldari High Council. The conversation lasted 1 hour. When it ended, Zithos sent a formal diplomatic message to the Vorathi Dominion. The message was simple. The Keldari Collective demanded an immediate ceasefire. They demanded that all remaining Mirashi prisoners be released. If the Vorathi refused, the Collective would impose full economic sanctions. Within hours, 6 more species joined the ultimatum. Then 10, then 15. Thaxarel received the messages as his fleet finished destroying the last human combat ships. Admiral Chen's flagship was crippled, but still functioning. Life pods drifted in space, carrying survivors. The High Commander faced a choice. He could continue the war. He could destroy what remained of the human fleet and then crush Earth itself. But if he did, his empire would face economic isolation from half the galaxy. Trade would collapse. Resources would dry up. The Vorathi Dominion might win the battle, but lose everything else. A communication request came through from Admiral Chen. Thaxarel accepted it. Chen's face appeared on screen. He was bleeding from a wound on his forehead. His bridge was filled with smoke and sparks. But his eyes were calm. "High Commander," Chen said, "I am offering you a choice. You can destroy us and face the consequences. Or you can withdraw and call this a strategic redeployment. Your pride will survive. Your empire will survive. And no more blood needs to be spilled today." Thaxarel wanted to refuse. Every instinct told him to crush this arrogant human. But he was not a fool. The numbers no longer favored him. Politics had changed the equation. "You have won nothing," Thaxarel growled. "The Mirashi are a fraction of what they were. Your fleet is destroyed. Your dead float in the void around us." Chen nodded slowly. "Yes. We lost many good people today. But we showed the galaxy that someone would fight for the innocent. That is worth more than any military victory." The silence stretched for a long moment. Finally, Thaxarel gave the order. The Vorathi fleet withdrew. The Battle of Vareth 7 was over. The humans had lost most of their ships, but they had saved 38,000 lives and changed the course of galactic history. Sometimes, that was enough. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Vareth 7. The Galaxy Council chamber looked the same as it always had, with its crystal walls and floating pods arranged in a perfect circle. But everything else had changed. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood on the central platform once again. This time, she was not alone. Beside her stood a Mirashi representative named Soleth, wearing the simple robes of her people. Behind them, ambassadors from 23 species, who had joined the coalition, waited in solidarity. The council speaker called the session to order. "We are gathered today to vote on the Universal Protection Accord. This agreement would grant legal protections to all pre-spaceflight civilizations, preventing their exploitation by council members." Elena watched the faces around the chamber. A year ago, this vote would have failed immediately. The powerful species would never have agreed to limit their expansion. But the galaxy had changed. The humans had shown everyone what courage looked like. People had started asking hard questions about their own choices. Ambassador Zithos rose from his pod. His blue skin looked healthier than it had a year ago, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "The Keldari Collective supports this accord. We have been silent for too long. It is time we remembered what our civilization was supposed to stand for." One by one, other ambassadors spoke their support. The Villani, the Thornax, the Syrian. Even species that had refused to join the coalition admitted that change was needed. The old ways had failed. The non-intervention accord had been twisted into a shield for criminals and oppressors. When the vote was called, 39 species voted yes. 6 abstained. Only 2 voted no, and one of them was the Vorathi Dominion. Krathfer, the Vorathi ambassador, stormed out of the chamber without speaking. His dominion had been humiliated. Their military reputation was in ruins. Their economy was struggling from months of sanctions. And now the galaxy had formally condemned everything they stood for. Alina felt no satisfaction watching him leave. She had not wanted to make enemies. She had only wanted to save lives. After the session, Alina walked through the corridors of the council station. She passed memorials that had been built over the past year. One honored the human soldiers who died at Vareth 7. Another listed the names of Mirashe, who had perished in the labor camps before rescue could come. A third celebrated the ordinary citizens across the galaxy, who had protested and demanded that their governments take action. She stopped at the memorial for Admiral James Chen. He had survived the battle, but just barely. His injuries had been severe. He spent 3 months in a medical facility before he could walk again. When he recovered, he retired from military service. Now Chen led the newly formed Galactic Humanitarian. Fleet ships from a dozen species worked together to respond to crises across the galaxy. They delivered aid. They evacuated refugees. They stood ready to protect those who could not protect themselves. It was the job Chen had always wanted. Even if he had not known it, Alina continued walking until she reached the Mirashe embassy. It was a new building, constructed just 6 months ago, when the Mirashe were granted provisional council membership. Their population was still recovering. Only 200 million had survived the Varathi occupation. But they were free now, and they were rebuilding. Soleth met her at the entrance. Ambassador Vasquez, thank you for your support today. You earned your place here, Alina said. Your people suffered more than anyone should have to suffer. But you survived. You endured. That takes strength. Soleth led her inside to a small garden that had been planted in the center of the building. Mirashe flowers bloomed in colors that Alina had never seen on Earth. Water trickled through a fountain carved from stone, brought from Vera 7. We wanted to show you something, Soleth said. She gestured toward the far wall. Alina walked closer and saw a plaque mounted on the stone. Words had been carved into it in the Mirashe language. Below the Mirashe script, a translation appeared in human English. The words were simple. Never again. Alina felt tears forming in her eyes. She knew those words. Humans had used them many times throughout their history. They had carved them on memorials after great tragedies. They were a promise and a warning. A reminder that some horrors must never be repeated. My grandmother taught me that phrase, Alina said softly. She survived a dark time on Earth long ago. People tried to destroy her family simply because of who they were. Strangers risked everything to save her. She spent the rest of her life making sure the world remembered what happened. Soleth nodded. We will remember too. And one day, when another species needs help, we will be the ones who stand up. That is our promise. A small sound came from behind them. Alina turned and saw a young Mirashe child peeking around a doorway. She recognized her immediately. It was the same child who had spoken to Captain Santos in the labor camp, the one who had told the others that the humans had come. The child walked forward slowly. She was healthier now, with bright eyes and a curious expression. She stopped in front of Alina and tilted her head. You are the human ambassador, the child said. The one who started the war. Yes, Alina replied. My name is Alina. My name is Tira. The child was quiet for a moment, as if gathering courage. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you come to save us? We had nothing to give you. We could not help you. We were just strangers. Alina knelt down so she could look Tira in the eyes. The question was the same one that dozens of species had asked over the past year. Why would humans sacrifice so much for people they had never met? What possible reason could justify the cost? The answer was simple, but it had taken the galaxy 3,000 years to understand. Because someone did the same for my grandmother, Alina said. When she was young and afraid and had no one to help her, strangers risked their lives to keep her safe. They did not know her. They got nothing in return. But they helped anyway, because that is what good people do. She placed a gentle hand on Tara's shoulder. We helped you because you needed help. And one day, when you are grown, you will see someone else who needs help. Maybe they will be a different species. Maybe they will come from a world you have never heard of. But you will remember this moment, and you will help them too. Tira thought about this for a long time. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. I understand, she said. We pass it forward. Alina smiled back. Exactly. We pass it forward. She stood up and looked at the memorial one more time. The words carved in stone seemed to glow in the soft light of the garden. Never again the galaxy had changed because one small species had refused to look away from injustice. Humanity had lost ships and soldiers and treasure. They had made powerful enemies. They had risked their very existence, but they had also proven something important. Courage was contagious. Compassion could spread faster than fear. And when good beings stood together, even the mightiest empires could be humbled. The war was over. The healing had begun. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, other species were watching. They were learning. They were finding their own courage. The humans had lit a flame. Now it was spreading across the stars, and it would never go out.